Good evening, I'm Klaudia Czerwińska and you're watching World News Tonight live from Warsaw. Poland's patient position after Germany introduced unilateral controls is exhausted, said Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk, as his government ceases to accept unregulated movement of migrants through the Polish-German border. However, the temporary changes also include Lithuania. More on that in just a moment, but before we begin, let's take a look at tonight's headlines. Brussels tells Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban there is no objective reasons to block Ukraine's EU accession. An Estonian convent near the border with Russia could stand accused of spreading pro-Kremlin propaganda. Polish president-elect prepares for his first activities after assuming office. After concerns were raised as to the symmetry of the trans-border movement of individuals, the Polish government reintroduced temporary border controls on the German and Lithuanian borders. This measure is to be introduced from July 7th, following anger in Warsaw over migrants being funneled into and returned to Poland. Paweł Trzaskowski explores the subject in more detail in his latest report.
Poland is reinstating controls on the borders with Germany and Lithuania. The announcement was made on Tuesday by the Polish Prime Minister and is a response to Berlin's change in its handling of illegal migrants.
For about a month now, the situation at the Polish-German border has changed significantly. The German authorities are actually refusing to let migrants into their country. This is very different to what has been happening for the past 10 years.
This tougher stance on migration from the government of Friedrich Merz was signaled ahead of the last general elections in Germany, as the Christian Democratic Union, the current Chancellor's party, included fighting illegal migration among the main themes of their campaign. One of the means of fighting such migration is the reintroduction of border controls, despite Berlin being a part of the open border Schengen area.
We currently have to carry out border controls because the protection of Europe's external borders is not sufficiently guaranteed. We know that this is a temporary measure.
Such one-sided control on the German borders meant that Poland could not verify the identity of migrants that were arriving from Germany. This lack of control caused some concern in Poland. Illegal border defense movement patrols were even formed on parts of the border, and the Polish Prime Minister's decision to seal the borders is to address this domestic political pressure, but also
to make sure that Germany engages in meaningful discussions, negotiations with the Polish side to get rid of these border controls at some point, because they are detrimental to the economic interests of both sides.
Reinstatement of border controls on the Polish-German border comes as the illegal migration on the border with Belarus has been successfully thwarted, according to the Polish foreign minister.
We have won the war on the Polish-Belarusian border. Only single successful crossings from the Belarusian side are being reported now.
This decrease in illegal migration numbers is attributed to border infrastructure, including a 200-kilometer-long barrier and an advanced surveillance system. Warsaw has also launched an information campaign discouraging migrants trafficked by Russia and Belarus from coming to the European Union through Poland. However, migrants are still being trafficked from Belarus through Latvia and Lithuania to Poland, as sufficient means to prevent such movement are not put in place by the Baltic states. This is why Poland is reinstating control on the Polish-Lithuanian border as well. The new border controls are temporary but irrevocable, according to the Polish Prime Minister. They are to begin on Monday next week. Paweł Trzaskowski for TVP World.
The Polish Supreme Court has confirmed the result of the presidential election despite thousands of electoral protests filed after the vote. This ruling paves the way for conservative Karol Nawrocki to be sworn in as the next head of state in August. The decision of the court was shrouded in controversy, though. So to explain what is it all about, we are now joined live by our reporter Kazimierz Łysiak, who is in front of the court building. So good evening, Kazimierz. Why is this formality causing such a stir? Tell us more.
Good evening, Claudia. Indeed, this is usually just a formality. And while it's been more than a month since the Polish presidential election, the emotions surrounding it are still running high. And that's mostly because the election result was very close. Conservative historian Karol Nawrocki, backed by the largest opposition party, Law and Justice, beat Warsaw Mayor centrist candidate Rafał Trzaskowski by a mere 400,000 votes. And the Polish Supreme Court is tasked with reviewing and investigating all kinds of electoral protests filed after the vote before officially recognizing the election result. Now, there have been more than 50,000 electoral protests filed after the vote this time, and the justices of the court have ruled that only 21 of those were filed correctly, and that wouldn't influence the result of the vote anyway. Members of the ruling coalition claim that because of a sheer number of these protests, that some of the votes should be recounted, and the justices of the Polish Supreme Court have disagreed with that. Now, there were dozens of supporters of both the opposition and the ruling coalition gathering here in front of the building of the Polish Supreme Court, where I'm standing right now. I spoke with some of them before the ruling was announced, so let's listen to what they had to say.
Our representatives were dispatched to local polling stations not to steal the election, but to make sure that the vote is not rigged. This is why Karol Nawrocki won the election, because we went there to make sure no one messes with the ballots. We saw that.
We're locked in a major constitutional conflict. It might be that an illegitimate president is sworn in. That means that the previous Law and Justice administration will soon find itself back in a position to rule. And once they're back in power, in 2 or 3 decades, we will be just another Belarus or Hungary-style regime.
Now, that's just one controversy. The other concerns the justices themselves, as the members of the ruling coalition, including the Polish Minister of Justice and Attorney General Adam Bodnar, says that the judges of the chamber which gave the ruling were chosen illegally by the previous government of the Law and Justice party. The justices did not care about these arguments today, and they have ruled that the election result was valid. So that means that President-elect Karol Nawrocki can be getting ready for that swearing-in ceremony in August.
Thank you very much. That was Kazimierz Łysiak from the Polish Supreme Court in Warsaw. And now, moving on to Estonia. Poland's president-elect is not wasting time as he embarks on his foreign affairs charm offensive. Only little less than a month after he was elected to be the next president, Nawrocki was to meet with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte and is now planning to make Washington his first trip after his inauguration in August. And as the incoming president is readying to hit the ground running, the right-wing opposition party who backed him is leading in recent polls. Our chief political correspondent, Aaron Damon, breaks down what comes next for president-elect.
Less than a month after he was voted into Poland's highest office, Karol Nawrocki wants to network. On Tuesday, the country's right-wing and Eurosceptic president-elect was expected to meet with NATO Secretary-General Mark Rutte, aiming to set the tone for future relations.
We will talk about Poland's future in the North Atlantic Alliance, our common challenges, and what happened recently at The Hague.
Leaders from across the alliance met at The Hague last month as member states signed off on raising defence spending to 5% of GDP. That headline target has been driven by US President Donald Trump, whose platform of national sovereignty and rallying against the old world order, Nawrocki imitated on the election trail.
Whatever you might think of Donald Trump, polls have lots of different opinions about him. Most polls see the United States as Poland's only credible military security guarantor.
In an extended interview released this week, Nawrocki, an ally of the opposition Law and Justice Party, also revealed more of his plans for when he takes over the presidency in early August.
The assumption is to visit Washington first. I had the opportunity to meet with Donald Trump as a presidential candidate. Quite recently, we spoke on the phone and President Trump invited me to the United States and said he would be happy to visit Poland and congratulate me on my success. So now, I think it's just a matter of getting the dates right.
Closer to home, Nawrocki's tone on Ukraine hardened during the campaign, ruling out the war-torn country's accession to NATO and ending a rare cross-party consensus on the issue. But he says he still wants to speak with Kyiv.
Of course, Ukraine, which is at war, is also our neighbor. I will visit all our neighbors as President of Poland.
But will you invite President Zelensky? Would you like to talk to him?
I will have to talk to President Zelensky.
Since Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk rose to power after the 2023 general election, his centrist government has been in a paralysing cohabitation with outgoing President Andrzej Duda, who, just like Nawrocki, is backed by law and justice. Duda has been using the presidential veto power to stall Tusk's proposed reforms, a pattern that is likely to continue under Nawrocki. In fact, Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski is even accusing Nawrocki of being installed to cause the collapse of the ruling coalition.
It's not good for him simply to be seen as a partisan president that blocks everything. That will hold him back, and his advisors will hold him back on that. But temperamentally and politically, he's a much, much tougher cookie than Andrzej Duda.
Although Tusk won a self-imposed vote of confidence in June, which was intended to reassert power in Parliament, his government's numbers are flailing. A new poll showing Law and Justice would come out on top if a vote was held next Sunday, and that the ruling coalition, made up of the Civic Coalition, the Left, Poland 2050 and the Polish People's Party, could not form again. An uncertain time for those in charge as Poland gears up for a new presidential era. Aaron Darman, TVP World.
This was meant to be a place that renounced all worldly affairs, and yet nothing could be further from the truth. According to Estonian officials, Putitsa convent near the border with Russia could stand accused of spreading pro-Kremlin propaganda. These allegations come as in April, Estonia passed a law requiring religious organizations to cut ties with foreign institutions that incite violence or hatred, and so it happens that the convent in question maintains a close relationship with Patriarch Kirill, who fully backs the invasion of Ukraine. John Todd has more on the story.
Russia's president and Patriarch Kirill last year, after Vladimir Putin received one of the Russian Orthodox Church's highest awards. The two are close, with the religious leader fully backing Moscow's invasion of Ukraine. And it's the pro-Kremlin warmongering position promoted by the Church that Estonia's MPs aim to tackle with a new law. The law, passed in April, requires religious organisations to cut ties with foreign institutions that incite violence or hatred. But this convent, close to the Russian border in eastern Estonia, is holding out, accused by officials of spreading propaganda.
The convent should be seen not simply as a religious institution, but also as a symbol of the Ruski Mir ideology on Estonian soil. An ideology promoted by the Russian state and the Russian Orthodox Church that blends religion, nationalism and imperial nostalgia.
The abbess, who was appointed by Patriarch Kirill, has been accused of echoing Russian state propaganda on religious persecution in Europe. But in a statement to the Daily Telegraph, she denied being involved in pushing the Kremlin line.
Our life in the convent is very simple. It consists of praying and working. We came to the convent to leave the secular world behind, to get away from these problems and dedicate our time to serving the Lord.
Moscow has sought to present Ukraine and its Eastern European allies as undemocratic regimes that bully Russian-speaking minorities. It's part of a wider hybrid warfare campaign against the West that's seen Russia use arson, vandalism, sabotage, cyber attacks and assassination attempts to undermine Europe's military support of Ukraine. The aim is to instill fear. A new survey published in Poland by the Onet platform found nearly 44% of the country fears the outbreak of a world war in the coming months.
It's understandable that Polish society as a whole is aware of the ongoing war in Ukraine, and people fear the potential threat coming from the east.
Vladimir Putin is praying that his propaganda, pushed by the Russian Orthodox Church, sparks security concerns. But the West has risen to the challenge and is confronting the Kremlin's line. John Todd for TVP World.
Brussels and Budapest continue to lock horns over whether or not Ukraine should be allowed to move forward on its path to EU membership. As Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán digs in his heels, the European Commission says Ukraine has made significant progress. Our correspondent Alex Cadier has been following the tit-for-tat for us and joins me from Brussels. Good evening, Alex. So is Hungary dashing Ukrainian hopes for a future in the EU?
Good evening, Claudia. Well, it's been a while since Viktor Orbán has expressed his opposition to Ukrainian membership of the European Union. In fact, it's been nearly a year to the day. He had a variety of reasons, and reasons that have changed over time as to why he objected to it. First, it was the treatment of Hungarian minorities in Ukraine. He's also since said that a country at war couldn't possibly join the European Union. But the European Commission's response to that is that the process is ongoing. There are clear milestones that Ukraine has to reach, has to pass, reforms it has to do to be able to move forward in this process. And that European Commission, which assesses Ukraine's progress in these reforms and these changes, says that it is moving forward. It is checking the boxes it needs to check to be able to move forward. It's important to say that this isn't just about Hungary saying they don't want Ukraine in the EU ever. It's actually Hungary saying they don't want Ukraine to even move forward in the process of one day joining the European Union. The European Commission earlier today saying that there's a lot more at stake than just this membership. Let's have a listen to what they said earlier.
When a candidate country is held back for no objective reasons, despite meeting the criteria, the entire enlargement process loses its credibility. So we really hope that we can still open the first cluster and very soon.
Clearly there, the European Commission wanting this process to move forward, Hungary blocking. Now, officials behind the scenes that I've been speaking to think that this objection is more leverage. Hungary wants to get leverage over the European Union, perhaps to get more funds, to get more flexibility. It's what they have been doing, being the most Kremlin-friendly member state of the EU for the last couple of years. Nevertheless, a very frustrating situation for Ukraine in the reforms that they are putting forward. They are checking the boxes, but for now, this process is stalled. And the war of words between Budapest and Brussels continues. Claudia.
Thank you so much. That was Alex Cadier from Brussels. Teens on Social, a pilot program by the European Commission, is set to test an age verification app in selected member states across the continent. The tool, designed to help countries protect their youth from harmful online content, will not be mandatory. However, as the discussions about the negative influence of social media is pushed to the forefront, the program might soon be introduced to more users. Natalia Oriol has the story.
Today, several European countries kicked off a pilot program for an age verification app aimed at curbing social media use. The technology will pave the way for an EU digital identity wallet, or an EID, set to come online in 2026. It will not be mandatory but serve as a tool for EU countries as they strive to make children safe online. The app allows users to prove they are old enough to access age-restricted online services, according to the developer website for the EU age verification solution. The app does not disclose personal data, is built on the European Digital Identity Wallet framework, and is compliant with Article 28 of the Digital Services Act. Testing the app are France, Spain, Italy, Greece, and Denmark. Poland is not on the list, but is also looking to protect its youth online. Marcin Józefczak, a Polish MP from the Civic Platform, told TVP World that a number of steps are taken, including the introduction of a new school subject, health education.
There is, the European Commission is going to introduce and present us with some tools for effective age verification, which are not mandatory. Yeah? And later on in Poland, we are making some laws in order to introduce effective age verification, for example, using platforms that we have, or some new digital ID for teenagers and for people.
What motivated the officials to take these steps? On June 10th, a 21-year-old man shot dead 10 people before killing himself at a school he formerly attended in the Austrian city of Graz. The incident was the deadliest mass shooting in the country's history. On the same day, a knifing incident shook France as a 14-year-old student stabbed a school aide in the town of Nogent. This was not an isolated incident, French Prime Minister François Bayrou said. He vowed not to remain indifferent to the wave of child violence, and French President Emmanuel Macron echoed the sentiment. As a general rule, most popular platforms set the minimum age limit for users at 13, and some specify alternative ages for selected locations. Facebook and Instagram state their exceptions, while Snapchat, Reddit and X cite local laws in their terms and conditions. The law is watched closely by several governments pursuing avenues to make the internet a safer place for children. But would similar laws work elsewhere?
We need to start from campaigns and from explaining to people why social media platforms are, how they can benefit from them, and why they are risky. Yeah? If they understand it, then we can start changing.
Wheels have been set in motion, and the effectiveness of the efforts remain to be seen. This report for TVP World by Natalia Oriol.
And as a lot is happening in Poland on the domestic front, from the ruling of the Supreme Court on the results of the presidential election to a reintroduction of temporary border controls with Germany and Lithuania in face of an escalating migrant dispute, to unpack the latest, I'm joined by Jovanka Jakubek-Lalik, Associate Professor at the Faculty of Law at the University of Warsaw. Thank you so much. Great to have you back, as always, here with us in the studio.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
So let's take a look at what happened today. Considering the verdict by the Supreme Court, was it even an option for the final result to be contested? What's your opinion?
Well, I don't believe that there was a huge margin for the result to be contested. Of course, we still remain with the problem of the legality of this verdict, because this extraordinary control chamber in the Supreme Court consists of the so-called neo-judges, which means that these judges do not really have the proper mandate to deliver this kind of ruling. However, in the Polish legal system, this verdict of the Supreme Court has this kind of declarative effect, not constitutive effect, meaning that this verdict is not creating a new legal situation. It's more kind of repeating that the mandate of the president comes from the elections. So I wasn't really expecting any other form of judgment coming from the Supreme Court today. And indeed, the declaration is that the president, the new president, Karol Nawrocki, can be sworn into office.
It's interesting how we meet on the other side of the equation, considering that the last time we spoke in the studio, we were talking about how many votes are going to make a difference when it comes to that presidential election. This ruling and the surrounding protests that took place in front of the Polish Supreme Court today, what do they tell us about the condition of democracy in Poland? Should it raise some red flags? What do you think of that?
Unfortunately, Polish society remains strongly divided. So we have strong supporters of Mr. Karol Nawrocki, and who is also backed by Law and Justice Party, which is currently in opposition. And we have also supporters of Rafał Trzaskowski, so the liberal option, which is backed by the current Polish government. And indeed, the division in the society runs very deep, and the possibility to reach consensus, possibility even to talk to each other and to agree on some basic aspects is increasingly more difficult. And this is something that we really need to work on very thoroughly in order for the democracy to be preserved, and also to have this understanding of democracy as a political system where we should in the first place talk to each other and understand each other, even if we disagree with each other.
Do you think there's any saving grace when it comes to that polarization within the Polish society?
Well, the polarization will probably remain. When the new president will take over the office, we can expect also quite difficult relations with the government, because the government and the president come from different political families and have different agendas, we can say. So I would expect quite challenging relations between the leader of the government, the prime minister, and the president. However, on the other hand, both of them are conditioned by the Polish constitution to cooperate, to collaborate, and to create the conditions for the government to fulfill their role, and also for the president to fulfill his role.
The dance of democracy and the dance of government. Let's move away from the ruling of the Polish Supreme Court and let's look at the decision made by the Polish government to temporarily reintroduce border controls with Germany and Lithuania. How do you assess this decision?
Well, this decision is coming after some period of tensions, also between German and Polish governments, because Germany actually were the first to reinstate the border control, not only with Poland, but also with other neighboring countries, justifying this decision by the notion that a lot of immigrants are coming via different routes to Germany. However, Polish government's position was that the eastern border remains very safe and vast majority of immigrants are stopped at the border. They are not entering Polish territory, so there is also no possibility to enter German territory from the Polish side, well, with few exceptions probably. However, the data that we have says that the migration is not really an important kind of challenge when it comes to the border traffic between Poland and Germany. What is really concerning is that actually Schengen Treaty is challenged by the current political situation and by also the pressures of migration coming from the Balkan direction and also from the eastern direction. So indeed, a lot of countries are either thinking or already reinstating some forms of border controls. And this is very sad also for me personally, because I remember very well when Poland entered European Union and then entered Schengen Treaty.
And the borders opened.
Exactly. So that made really a huge difference for us to be able to travel freely without border controls. And hopefully this the situation will remain. We will not face increasing controls on the borders within the European Union.
I mean, as we've heard from the Polish officials, this is only a temporary measure, so let's hope this is going to be put under control. How do you think that this situation, because we've heard some very firm words from Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk regarding the whole situation, is actually going to influence the diplomatic relations of Poland and Germany?
Well, the bilateral relations always need to be based on mutual understanding and mutual respect. However, also both of the countries will remain committed to protecting their own interests. So also here the German and Polish governments will need to find solution in order to address the challenging situations and work together to solve them, because vast majority of the modern problems are not, we are not able to solve them individually. We need to really work together also between different countries, between different organizations in order to address them.
Very shortly, because unfortunately our time on the program is coming to an end, but how do you think that the government's decision that was made is going to influence Karol Nawrocki's first weeks in office? He surely must be satisfied with such developments, I would suppose.
Well, we don't know much still about his approach to the foreign policy, and actually the current president Andrzej Duda quite soberly noticed that it is really different to assess foreign policy and domestic policy when you are sitting behind the desk of the president, comparing to the other situation also during the electoral campaign. So
especially when you need to start making those decisions hands-on.
Exactly. So definitely we will need to wait and see to what extent the political program of Mr. Nawrocki will remain, and what his decisions will be as the Polish president. However, I would still like to notice that the foreign policy is run by the Polish government, and the president actually is also obliged by the constitution to cooperate with the government on the basis of foreign policy.
Regardless of what we've seen so far, let's hope for a fruitful cooperation between both sides. Thank you so much, Jovanka Jakubek-Lalik, Associate Professor at the Faculty of Law and Administration at the University of Warsaw. Great to have you back.
Thank you very much.
And so this would be all the latest news here on World News Tonight. Thank you so much for joining. I'm Klaudia Czerwińska, and we do hope to see you soon here on TVP World for more.